Hello and welcome to episode number 10 of the Lifestyle Engineering Podcast. It's your host Renat Gabitov here, and I cannot believe that we've already done 10 entire episodes. We've had episodes with incredible people ranging from philanthropists to entrepreneurs to adventurers. And today's podcast episode is a true lifestyle engineer in his core. He probably has lived 10 lifetimes in his one. Rick LaRoche is a Navy frogman, he is a US diplomat, he's an author, he's a pilot, he is a college professor, and he is strong, going and exploring what else is possible in life. Today's conversation ranges all over the place from different topics, from his upbringing to his travels and him being on the Survivor show in Sweden. I'm really excited for you to eavesdrop on this incredible conversation, so let's have a listen.
Hi, my name is Rick LaRoche. I'm 73 years old. I was born and raised in the U.S., but I've lived all over the world, but predominantly I would say in Sweden since I left the U.S. I have a military background, I have a university lecturing background, I have a business background, I have a sports background, and I'm a retired U.S. diplomat. I'm passionate about mindset, mental toughness, grit, resilience, optimism, successful aging, anything along those lines. Peak performance, human performance, just all the new incredible research and the findings that are coming along that are just challenging all the things that I was taught when I was in school.
I'm really excited to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on. It took us a little bit of time to get set up and a couple weeks to also get this episode scheduled. But I'm really excited to have this conversation because you and we initially connected through a program on peak performance called Zero to Dangerous, right? And I saw you share, and we were evaluating, I think, on a scale from 0 to 10, how aligned we are and how well we perform and everything. And that led me to really looking into your background, and I realized, whoa, you're a Navy SEAL, a survival show as well. So I'm really excited for this.
No, that's a fantastic program, that Zero to Dangerous. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I didn't know too much about Jamie Wheal and Stephen Kotler until I read that book, Stealing Fire, which literally set me on fire. And then I started reading all their older books too and following everything they do. So when I got a chance to do that course, I was absolutely thrilled. I'm very honored and humbled because I've looked at some of your podcasts and I see the caliber of people that you have on, and I truly do not think that I fit into that. I mean, these are people with thousands of followers. I don't know that I have any followers anywhere, despite the fact that I do have a blog, but I write mostly for my own interest in the hopes that if one person gets something out of it, I'm happy.
Exactly, and that's my philosophy as well. You know, I do these interviews because I'm just a curious person, excited to learn perspectives of different people, their lives, how they think, what their belief systems look like. And more recently, I've been reflecting on the fact that if a post has more views versus the other one that has very little views, it doesn't mean that the post with a lot of traction is more true than the one without. So right now we're living in the era when it's really difficult to distinguish what's actually true and what's not. There's so much information. Recording stuff is so easy. Publishing stuff is so easy. Anybody can start a podcast. Anybody can start a YouTube channel. So it's a really interesting time. And you mentioned a little bit about your technology illiteracy.
Technosaurus, I call them.
Yes.
Technologically challenged.
I would imagine it's actually revelating things in so many ways because you don't get distracted as many of us do. Younger people, you know, and folks that are born with phones, it's so difficult for us just to keep concentration.
I know. I see all these, but I see all these funny things too, statements that younger people make. And of course, I mean, if I were their age, I would make it too. And you've probably seen them on the net where they talk about, you know, why do they have a hashtag button on the telephone? You know, Twitter wasn't invented until, you know, not realizing that it meant number or pound sign, or, you know, that it had other meanings before that. But it's like I grew up with watching a black and white Western called The Lone Ranger. It was a just, you know, I was every Saturday morning, and the theme song to it, I won't try and sing it, but it went diddle 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 diddle, which I always knew until I got into high school as the theme song of the Lone Ranger. Only later did I realize it was the William Tell Overture. It was classical music, so you know I'm
It
guilty
is.
of it too.
And where did you grow up? How did your upbringing look like in
I grew up in
Florida?
Florida, born and raised in Florida, a rarity because a lot of Americans seem to migrate to Florida.
And how was life growing up in Florida back in the day? How did it look like?
Well, yeah, I was born in the mid 40s, and you know, it was coming out of World War II. My parents were young. I'm a boomer, which I embrace. I love the term boomer. That's my gaming name is Crazy Boomer, and I do a lot of hashtags with Crazy Boomer.
What type of gaming?
Counter Strike,
Oh, no
more
way!
defensive. Yeah.
You play Counter Strike? I grew up with Counter Strike.
Oh, wow. Well, my younger son does too. I have to distinguish because I have a son who's 40 as well. So my 14-year-old is no, I am just recently joined, and we were just starting to train, and boom, the virus hit. It's because it's called the Silver Snipers. It's the Swedish senior gaming team. You have to be over 65 to be on it. So
Whoa.
yeah, and they're really good, believe me. I'm not nearly as good as they are. I have a lot of work to do to catch up. So now I just kind of practice with bots, and maybe with my son once in a while when I can lure him away from his things. But he kills me too quickly, so he gets bored. Uh,
That's insane, and I feel like I feel like gaming in general puts us in such a deep flow state. I remember when I was growing up, I was like 13, 14 years old when I got into Counter Strike. I would just spend my entire Saturdays playing the game. I would just lose the sense of time. I would go to a computer club. Back in the day, we would have like 4 or 5 people of friends. We could go to a computer club, and in the computer club, we would all play against each other.
oh,
Super
you
fun.
can easily use it. I mean, lose it. That's one of the, I would say, probably uh, the flow state that I recognize the quickest through me, and also through my son. I mean, you know, he'll say, "I'm just going in for a minute," and you know, 6 hours later or something to get something to drink or something to eat, and then right back in again. I read an interesting article not too long ago that the U.S. Army was kind of looking over the horizon for their needs of the future, and they were beginning to think that maybe we should be recruiting Gen Z kids as they become of age to the military, because they have this incredible ability to assimilate lots of things coming all at the same time and make quick decisions. And that's what they believe, you know, we'll need in cyber or modern warfare. Be interesting to see. I'd never thought of gamers as, you know, going into the military, but why not?
That's right. I think they already recruit gamers to drone operators that
Well,
pretty
that would be
much have
good. Yeah.
they have a lot of screens. They have similar controls to what you would have in a modern computer game, and people already have a lot of their skills and reaction and philosophies. I think.
I mean, it was a completely different world. And, you know, kids weren't coddled. Um, there was no such thing as helicopter parenting. You know, I spent long days on the beach, body surfing in huge waves, all by myself, no adult supervision. Come back for lunch, go back down to the beach again. Just kind of you learn to flex your wings you hurt yourself, you learned what hurt and how to avoid it, and you failed, more importantly, I think, tons of times, and you learned how to deal with failure. Not necessarily to like failure, but how to deal with it, learn something from it, pick yourself up, and keep on going. Worries me a little bit. I don't want to digress again. Worries me a little bit sometimes about really young people today when I hear them. And again, maybe I shouldn't go there. I don't know. But it does seem that we've lost somewhere along the line a bit of that. You know, let's let kids kind of learn about life through the school of hard knocks, as long as it's not dangerous to them. Certainly no parent wants their child to have any sort of severe injuries, but I'd already broken my arm twice by the time I was 6 or 7.
What
Falling
happened?
out of a tree. Yeah, it just fell out of a tree. My parents had told me, you really shouldn't be climbing trees when it's raining because they're slippery. Ah, good idea. Climb a
Good
tree
idea.
while it's raining to see if my parents were right, and they were.
In
Never
Russia,
again
same
did I
thing.
climb a tree in the rain.
Mm. In Russia, same thing. People just let the kids go outside, especially during the Soviet time. You know, there is this camaraderie and the expectation that the community will take care of each other. So they would just let kids walk around, do whatever they want. And I do remember me growing up. I grew up in the post-Soviet time, but when I would go to a village to see my grandparents. I spent maybe 2-3 months during the summertime in those villages. They just let us out and we could do whatever we wanted. If we wanted to go swim in the lake, we could do that. Fish, there was no limit to what you could do.
That's fantastic. No, I mean, we were hunting and fishing, and my father taught me how to use firearms properly, and what you were allowed to shoot and what you weren't allowed to shoot. Although I may have broken that rule once or twice, but yeah, the same with fishing. You knew how big a fish it had to be for you to keep it. Of course, it's a different world today that we live in, but I'm trying to
How
live.
young were you when you were trained to use firearms?
Oh my gosh, probably started from about 8 or 9, somewhere around there. But it started just, learning the safety aspects of it, not the
Mm.
shooting, just the safety aspects of it. And then eventually target shooting, shooting beer cans and beer bottles, stuff like that. And then moving on to animals. And of course, in those days, pretty much anything was fair game in Florida. Later on, alligators went on to the endangered species list, but they're off of it now. So last time I was back in Florida, we had some alligator steak, which was really good. So,
Wow. And aren't they crazy predators? I saw videos of them snatching people, jumping out of the water.
gosh, I mean, it's so hard to generalize about them. I mean, they are predators. There's no doubt about that. You can never lose sight of that. People want to go up and get their photograph next to them, or just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. When you're growing up in Florida, you learn these things like, where there's still murky water, you don't want to just sit there at the edge. There might be something just underneath the surface waiting, for something to come along. Or snakes, for example. Florida has 4 or 5 different types of venomous snakes. There's one called the coral snake, and one called gosh, I can't remember what it's called, but they have the same color stripings. They're red, yellow, and black. So what you have to learn is the 2 colors together. So we learn as little kids, when you go outside, a red stripe next to a black stripe. Red and black, friendly to Jack. Red and yellow, kill a fellow. So you could instantly look at the snake and know, oh, nope, I'm getting away from this one, or that one's okay.
I think that's exactly the problem of letting kids play around in Florida. You have alligators, you have venomous snakes.
Water
Probably
moccasins, copperheads, rattlesnakes, yeah.
that's why me me walking around in Russia, that was chill. You know, we don't have bears walking around, despite this stereotype. I would imagine I would imagine it's not the best thing
Our
for
bears were
parents.
small bears. They weren't like you find in the Rockies or up north in Canada and places like that. Very small bears, but bears nonetheless. So yeah,
And
so growing up like that, and also we kind of had instilled in our minds very early on that anything was possible. You know, there were jobs galore. There were just everything was wide open. Um, you didn't seem to feel any boundaries to what you could do if you wanted to do it, and you were willing to do the hard work to get there.
what do you think created that mindset in people?
Geez, I don't know. Well, obviously, a booming economy had to help. Um, I think the fact that our parents had just come home from a war. Um, I don't know if your parents were or your grandparents, but and I know the Soviet Union lost a heck of a lot more people than the United States did in World War II, and that aspect gets lost in history a lot of times. But I don't know. It just seemed like everything was possible, and it was a very contagious mindset. It took a while for me to pick it up because I was a poor student, as I mentioned, really, really bad. If they had had all of these acronyms that they have today, I certainly would have been at least one of them. Not sure which one, if not more than one or two, because I was, my teachers were always complaining. Either I didn't pay attention, or I didn't sit still, or I worked too fast and then disturbed all the rest of the class. And it was like, Um, but eventually, you figure it out.
And what were you thinking about your life when you were younger? I would imagine when the grades are not a top priority, they were definitely not a top priority for me. I didn't have any vision for my life. I was just a kid, you know, playing video games and living in the moment. And at one point, something changed, and for me, it was reading a book on personal development and getting my first plan, life mission. I had certain things like climb Mountain Everest, make $1 million, and run an Ironman. Those were like very generic goals I had set up for myself at like 14 or 15. But even with those goals, I wanted to get my things together. I wanted to really advance towards them, and that's what got me moving. Really got me to climb out of just wasting my life playing video games, hanging out, and doing whatever. Was there a moment like this in your life?
Yeah, I probably didn't have as concrete goals as you did. I mean, sports was the big thing for me. I was lucky enough to be reasonably good in sports, and that kind of kept me in good standing in school. In particular, swimming. I was a very good competitive swimmer. That helped a lot. That gave me some goals. But as far as knowing what I wanted to be when I was an adult, it was just too far in the future. I did see a movie. I think it was came out in 1957, and it was called The Frogman with Richard Widmark. And that kind of really inspired me. I must have been 10 or 11 years old at that point. And I think that I saw it and thought, wow, that's cool. I'd like to do that. And it just percolated in the back of my mind. It's not that I thought about it all the time and went through life saying, it was not until I got into the Navy that I then started thinking more about it. But yeah, that, and eventually, of course, I guess maybe in the 11th grade, 11 out of 12 grades, I started having better grades, and then university was a priority for me. I wanted to go to university. But these were short-term goals. I mean, goal setting is super important, as you know, but I didn't know that much about goal setting in those days. I think, like you, I kind of lived in the moment.
What did you want to study in college?
Well, interesting that you should ask me that. I didn't have a clue. I was surprised that I got into university. There was no internet in those days, of course. So you stood in line and, to register. And as I got closer and closer to the woman sitting there, taking all the information, I heard her ask the fellow in front of me, and what's going to be your major? And I thought, oh shit, I haven't got a clue. I don't even know what they offer here. I hadn't even looked at a school catalog. So he said business administration. So I immediately said business administration, which was a horrible mistake because that led me to dropping out after just a couple of months because it was not me. I couldn't deal with it. Later on I enjoyed business, but at that point, no, it was total failure for me.
And what was the frame of thinking back in the day? Right now, it seems like people associate success with going to college. If you do not get that degree that will end up costing you $200,000, then you will amount to nothing in life. What was it like back then?
The pressure was different. The pressure back then was a high school degree. Get your high school degree. And there were times when my parents thought I wasn't even going to get out of high school. And they told me that later on, after I got a graduate degree, when I got my master's degree. They said, God, we thought you'd never get out of high school. So that was the big pressure. At least get a high school degree. If you got a college degree, a BA or a BS, you were well ahead of the game back then. Today, I mean, you probably need, unless you're in some sort of IT or I don't know, there must be a lot of things I'm unaware of where you don't necessarily need a college degree, but otherwise you probably need at least a master's degree today. I'm speculating. I'm not an expert in that field. I don't really know. I just know back then I wanted to get a college degree.
Well, right now it doesn't seem like you need to get a degree at all in many cases because your first job is going to determine your second job. So as long as you get that first job, as long as you have performance, experience, whatever it is, then nobody cares about what degree you have in my experience.
That's true. Your first job proves you're hireable. Somebody was willing to bet on you. And then you move on from there. My degrees, my undergraduate and graduate degrees are in geography and political geography. And I remember my father saying, what are you going to do with that? And I said, I don't know, but I like it. And if I'm going to study it, study something, I want to study something I like and not get tied to a job, which is interesting because when I joined the State Department to become a diplomat, more than 50% of the people in my class were attorneys, and they had gone to law school because dad was a lawyer or mom was a lawyer, and that was just kind of what they were expected to do. And they spent all that time and money in law school and worked for a few years and said, oh God, I hate it. And I'm sure that can apply to a lot of other professions. I'm not trash talking attorneys. My daughter-in-law has a law degree, so.
Well, it seems like at every point of time in the world, there is just a path that a society wants to follow. Go to college, get a job, and then you'll be successful, get a house, get a mortgage, get kids, plant a tree, all that kind of the standard stack. And with people who occupy the political offices, it's usually, okay, you need to become a lawyer, you need to practice a little bit, and then you can actually become whatever it is that you want to become in the political realm.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, plant a tree. When I was in the third grade, we had something called Arbor Day, which was like a day for trees and nature. And my school went out and we planted a whole forest of pine trees. And every time I go back, I look at these things and they're huge now. And I think, wow, I planted that thing. It was about that big, So yeah, not planting trees probably the way you meant, but no. I have a hard time comparing the way it was to the way we do things today. I mean, there's so much information available. it's so quick to find out things. You've got all the libraries of the world at your fingertips. Move here, move there, get this information. It's like a tsunami that washes over you. We didn't have that. So maybe life was a lot simpler in that respect. There were no, as I call them, WMDs, weapons of mass distraction, not destruction, other than maybe TV. And even TV, wasn't on that much. So or didn't broadcast that much.
And probably not as much content to pick from. Right now you can just pretty much be enslaved to a computer or to television for so long. There's this concept of binge watching that is very very
It's
popular.
going on right now.
I do not know how people. Yeah, people, especially right now during the lockdown. Yeah, people just spend like their entire days watching a TV show. And the really interesting thing is that relatively recently they figured out the human triggers and how to get them hooked, how to feed them this dopamine, so that they keep clicking, keep watching, keep doing stuff. And they're billion-dollar companies that engineer this. So it's very sad that although we have so much information, we also do not get to be present, do not get to really think, just consume.
Yeah, dopamine's great stuff. I love it. I even tell my younger son, when he's in school and he does well on a test, I said, didn't that feel good when the teacher, said, Sean, you've, got an A on this? He goes, yeah. And I said, that's a dopamine dump. I said, you want to get your dopamine dumps when you can. And then, of course, you open up a can of worms. What's dopamine? But yeah, no, we all like it. It's potent, along with the other neurochemicals that come flooding down for various things. But
how did you transition? I want to get back a little bit to your education and what you thought your life would be. So you were in the line figuring out what major you would be. You picked business because the guy in front of you said business, and it just seemed like something you could do. You said you dropped out 3 months later from that program.
3 months, I'd say more like 2 months, and I still lived at home because I went to a local university, the University of South Florida in Tampa. And so, I mean, I got up every morning and drove off and, came back at some point in time. But I just stopped going to classes. I couldn't handle it. So I was too much of a coward to tell my parents I dropped out. So I'd still leave at the same time, but I'd go to the beach. So, my tan kept getting deeper and deeper and darker and darker. And finally, my dad sat me down and said, are you still going to school? And I thought, oh, crap. I said, no, I'm not. I stopped back in whenever it was, October. And he said, okay. He said, what did you plan on doing? And I said, well, I got this really good business plan, Dad. I thought if you would loan me $50, I can buy a lawnmower and some other equipment and a little trailer that I can hook up to my car, and I can drive around in the mornings and mow lawns, cut grass at different houses, And I said, I'll do that until about noon and then go to the beach the rest of the day. And he says, so that's going to be your career? And I said, well, for now. And he said, I don't think so. And so he took me down the next morning, and mind you, I was 18. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a minor, or well, I was a minor per se. You had to be 21 to be of age in the U.S. in those days. He took me down to the recruiting offices, and they're all conveniently located right next to each other. And he said, you're going to join one of these today, but we've always been a Navy family, so why don't you talk to them first? So I went in and talked to them, and I said, okay. Yeah.
What was going through your mind? You wanted to surf and
busted, that was going through my mind. I've been caught with my pants down, and now I'm going to pay the consequences, or pay the price, suffer the consequences. So I I had really no choice unless I wanted to move out and try and make it on my own, which wouldn't have worked too well. So I did.
What did you think about the idea when your dad introduced the idea of uh, doing some sort of military?
Yeah, well, it was mandatory military service in those days. I don't think they stopped the draft until the mid 70s. I could be wrong on that. But I mean, I was already in and out by that time. But there was still a draft system going, and um, as soon as that school term had been over, the university would have reported to the draft board that I was no longer attending classes, which would have meant I would be eligible for the draft. And if you're drafted, you don't have much of a say-so in what you do or where you go. You're going into the Army pretty much. And my dad was smart enough to preempt this by saying, look, go down and talk to them, and maybe you can find some things you want to do, instead of saying, here, this is what you're going to do, and you get a broader
Just have a choice.
choice.
And what were the choices? I'm sure that not many people know different branches of military.
Well, I think they do, or at least in the U.S. Although I'm a bit concerned that the percentage of people that have served in the military now is probably the smallest it's ever been. Don't ask me for statistics, but I'd be surprised if it was more than 8, 9, 10%, because it is an all volunteer military. And the thing that I thought was good about the draft was it was sort of it was something everybody had to do. Doesn't matter what your color was, what your religion was, everybody had to do it.
Gender probably is the only.
Well, in my day, they had separate military forces for females. The women in the Navy were called waves for some reason. I'm sure it stood for something, but I always just thought we always used to joke and say ride the waves as a ship would do, but not very politically correct. But in those days, no one knew what politically correct was. So, and that would lead off to a whole nother rabbit hole, which I won't go down. But yeah, it was something that was just kind of expected of you, and you were maybe not happy when your turn came up, but it was something that you did. And practically everybody served, unless you had some sort of serious disability or you were a conscientious objector. Meaning, for some religious reasons or particular beliefs, you were just unable to use a weapon or go into the military. And, that's fine. I mean, everybody has their own belief system, and I don't.
But essentially, it was a norm. It wasn't something out of ordinary. These days, if a kid just slacks off, goes surfing, doesn't want to do anything, doesn't read, drops out of college, the dad says, "Okay, man, I'm sending you to the military school," or something like that, and that's a shock.
Yeah, I suppose the parent can threaten to do it, but there is no formal mechanism that will call them in, like a draft, because the draft was abolished, as I said, sometime, I think, in the mid 70s. The thing I liked about the draft was that, as I said, it cut through all areas of society and all classes. For example, growing up in the Deep South, my schools were never integrated. I had never gone to school with a Black person in my life. Knew lots of them from the neighborhood and stuff, but we didn't go to the same schools and through sports. But it was first in the Navy that, we were all living together and everything. And you suddenly realize, what's the big deal? Why do people say they're horrible, or why do people say, oh, they can't do this? They're just like me, So it's a good equalizer for everybody. It puts you all on the same level and then lets you kind of build yourself back up again. And because of that, it gets people who come into the military, no matter what branch, who would not have joined on their own free will. but now that they're in, have found, hey, it's something I can do, and they stay in.
So
I didn't make a career out of it, but I know lots of people that did, and they went in not intending to make a career out of it, but they did.
coming back to that drafts table or area, your dad told you talk to the Navy guys first. How did the conversation go? What did you ask?
Well, I didn't really have anything to offer them except a pulse. Uh, and I was out of high school. I had a degree, a high school degree, and just a couple of months of college. Um, what they offered me that appealed to me was the ability to get out from where I was and see a greater part of the world. I traveled a little bit in the U.S. When I was in school, gone to different places, gone out to California from Florida, and that was like going to the moon to me in those days. It was completely different. Whereas, I don't know, maybe I didn't give the other branches a fair shake. I just kind of liked the idea of, go out and go around the world and see different countries and cultures and things. So I ended up just signing with the first ones I talked to, and also because the family had been a Navy. I'd had a admiral in the family somewhere, and my dad had been in the Navy, and just, I don't know, it just felt, I go a lot with my gut feeling, and my gut feeling said, yep, this is what you want to do. Now, once I left and went to boot camp, my gut feeling was, oh man, why did you do this? And but that's part of being homesick, being afraid, being scared.
How did it start? How did you begin your journey in the Navy?
Well, I mean,
How long did it take you to get
it's
in?
the same. It's the same for everybody. You go to boot camp, and then you get some sort of vocational training. In my case, I went to Gunner's Mate Guided Missile Schools. I went to boot camp in right outside of Chicago in Great Lakes, Illinois, in the middle of the winter, and it was freezing ass cold for this Florida boy. And then the Gunner's Mate Guided Missile Schools was another 6 months, and that was also literally at the same base, just right across the street from where I had been in boot camp. So that was my first real exposure to cold. And then I got orders to go to a destroyer, a guided missile destroyer, and was on a cruise there to the Mediterranean when I got my orders finally to go to BUDS, to basic underwater demolition SEAL training.
You get
And
your
I had,
orders to go to
yeah,
buds.
but no, but I had applied for it and taken the test a couple of times, and I never knew what happened. In boot camp, we were sitting in the chow hall one day, and or in other words, in the cafeteria. They call it a DIFAC or a DFAC now or something, dining facility, but we called it the chow hall. And in came 4 or 5 guys in dark blue tight-fitting T-shirts and jump boots. Yeah, I mean, they just didn't look Navy. I thought at first they were Marines. And so I asked the guy next to me, I said, who are those guys? And he goes, yeah. He says, those are Frogmen. And then it dawned on me, the movie, The Frogmen. I said, no way. And he said, yeah. And I said, so what are they doing here in Chicago? And he said, they're recruiting. So I signed up to take the test. I passed the test, which was not a really hard test. I mean, anybody in reasonably good shape could do it. It was running and swimming and pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, et cetera, all within a certain time period. Waited for I was told then that I would get orders at the end of boot camp. So when they read out my orders and said I was going to Gunner's Mate Guided Missile School, I was shocked, and I went up to the guy and I said, there must be a mistake. And he goes, no, the Navy doesn't make any mistakes, son. You're going to Gunner's Mate Guided Missile School. So any rate, off I went because you got no choice in the matter. And then
And
another group
as far
came
as I
along.
know, a quick question. As far as I know, the back in the day, the number of people who were Navy SEALs who didn't end up coming home was staggering because a lot of Navy SEALs they were on the beaches during the Second World War during the invasion of France. I might be wrong. So the mortality rate was insane.
You're
Did
right.
did you know what it meant to be a Navy SEAL and what that implied?
Well, let's get the terminology right. In World War II, it was Underwater Demolition Team, UDTs. And they were called the Naked Warriors because literally they swam up on the beaches there to ahead of the amphibious invasions to remove the obstacles from the shallow water so the landing crafts could come in, and even up on the beach. And don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure. Somewhere, I think it was on one of these invasions that was close to a 50% mortality rate. And I mean, they didn't carry weapons, they had a knife. So they would go up, set their charges, and then
Whoa.
swim back off into the sea. And no, I had no real comprehension of that part. I had seen the movie. That was a Hollywood production, which was, and most of the, if I remember correctly, most of the movie was about what took place in the Pacific, not what took place in Europe. So no, but I mean, I knew it was naval special warfare, and and every branch of the military has their special forces, and I have great respect for all of them.
And when you applied, what did you have in mind?
I didn't want to end up sitting on a ship, um, just tinkering with guided missiles and trying to fix them. And yeah, it just didn't seem all that exciting. I wanted to do something else. That's what I had in mind. Nothing really concrete. Not I'm going to go here or I'm going to do that or I'm going to be this. I think mainly, yeah, it seemed exciting. The movie influenced me when I was young, and I saw it as a great opportunity to get out of uh, what we call the fleet. In other words, riding ships all the time. Of course, back in those days, you would end up riding ships anyway. Your platoon would go back on a med cruise or go on a North Atlantic cruise or somewhere else. Or if you were a West Coast team, you'd make different cruises. So it was the right thing to do. I maybe sometimes second guess what would have happened had I stayed in longer. But I didn't. So, it's everything has worked out well. I've got friends who made careers out of it, and we're still in touch with my old swim buddy well after 50 years of graduating from BUD/S. I went through class 39 on the East Coast in Little Creek, Virginia. In those days, we had training on two coasts, and I think sometime maybe in the late 70s. Again, I'm not sure. They consolidated all the training to Coronado in San Diego, which
I'd love
made
to
sense.
learn. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the BUDS program. It's considered one of the most difficult things you can do as a human, both physically and mentally. How did Class 39 look like back in the
Well,
day?
okay, class 39 was a large class. I think we had close to 250 people who began. Well, let me regress just a little bit because I said I applied for it again in Gunner's Mate Guided Missile School. Passed the test, was told I would get orders, but didn't. I got orders to go to this ship. So when I got to the ship was based in Norfolk, which is not far at all from Little Creek Amphibious Base, maybe 20 or 30 miles. So I thought, great, the first time I get an opportunity, I can go straight to the base where BUD/S is and say, hey, what happened? I passed the test twice. Where are my orders? Yeah. So I asked the officer when I came on board, when do you think I can get some liberty, get some permission to go to Little Creek? He said, in 6 months. And I said, what? why so long? And he said, because we're getting underway for a Mediterranean cruise tomorrow morning. So I thought, the universe is working against me. It's just not going to work. But at any rate, the orders finally came through when I was in Istanbul, Turkey, and they flew me back and I started. It's different today, and they write a lot more about it today. It's more well documented. They've made movies about it. And I think the History Channel even has a documentary for a class. It's changed a lot. It's evolved a lot. So the story I'll tell you now is what it was like when I went through. And I arrived there really in poor shape because I'd been on board a ship. I hadn't been running. I hadn't been swimming.
Don't you have gyms on the ships? Or
sorry,
people
no, not in those days. Are you kidding? Yeah, if you wanted to work out, it would be lifting a projectile and moving it over to where one of the big, artillery, or not artillery, but one of the big cannons on the ship would be, and then moving it back. They weighed a ton, but nobody would do that in their right mind. No, there was nowhere to work out. I suppose you could do sit-ups and push-ups and find somewhere to do pull-ups, but
all of those young bucks with so much energy in them sitting sitting on the ship.
yeah, well, you saved all that energy for when you came to a port and you went ashore to have fun.
With the waves,
we always
right?
used to feel so sorry for the Russian sailors because every once in a while we'd be in the same port as a Soviet ship would pull in. And they were always, we were left footloose and fancy free, go have fun, be back by this time, stay out of jail, basically. And they were all in groups and were taken to museums and cultural sites and, which, different strokes for different folks. But I felt like these are young guys our age. I bet they'd like to be doing this too.
Yeah. So you just had complete freedom back in the day where the Russians would have like a cultural program.
Well, it seemed that way. It seemed they went to museums, they went to the cultural sites, we went to the bars, we did see some cultural sites too. But I mean, you're 19 years old, you're not that interested.
Were you allowed to drink?
Off the ship, yeah. The U.S. Navy was a dry Navy. I believe it still is. You weren't allowed to have any alcohol. And there we used to envy the Brits because they had their rations of rum. So, but yes, off the ship. And of course, it was frowned upon to come back completely drunk, which many people did on many occasions, myself included. Shit happens. If you got in trouble, got in a fight, you could end up, sitting in the brig, which is the Navy jail on board the ship, and maybe not being able to go out at the next port. So you did kind of try to behave yourself. It's not like we were wild savages that ran around. Anyway, back to that. So, I got there and, I looked at the people around me the first day and I thought, holy shit, these, they look like Olympic athletes, and they were getting up at 4 a.m. and taking cold showers. And this was January and like minus, I don't know, 8, -10 Celsius, not horribly cold, but cold enough. And I just kind of thought, geez, wow, here I am, a little bit of flab on me from being on board the ship. And then we just set off into all the physical stuff. I mean, there was obstacle courses, beach runs, swims, all kinds of things, building up to Hell Week, which, as I remember, was the 5th or the 6th week. And again, I could be wrong on that. That was really the make or break part. If you got through Hell Week, your chances were very, very good.
How many weeks before did you have before the Hell Week?
That's what I said. I think it was about the 4th or the 5th week. It might be longer now. It might be, maybe it's the 5th or the 6th. I believe it was the 4th, possibly the 5th week. So, and they were trying to, we were doing a lot of physical exercise and we were getting a lot of harassment, but nothing like we were going to get in Hell Week.
And they won. You show up. All of the super athletes are gathered around you. What was going through your head, and what was the first day like?
Um, well, I was scared shitless, to be honest with you. I'm not a particularly large person. I'm about 170 and weigh 74 kilos. And, there were some massive guys, college football players, and, just really, really prime specimens. And I just, I didn't know what to expect. So I started thinking right from the very beginning, I can't worry about these people now. I don't need to worry about myself, and I can't worry about anything except what's going on right now. In other words, talk about living in the moment. You really lived in the moment, because if you looked too far ahead, it could be almost overwhelming. So this was the beginning of learning how to set goals and break them down into micro goals, so that you're doing a particular evolution, a particular exercise. You only thought to the end of that exercise. When that was over, you tackled whatever came next. You never thought, oh, I wonder what's coming next. That was the way you did. I think that's the way everybody did. Certainly the way I did it. And I just told myself, they can't make me quit. They can't throw me out. All they can do is make me want to quit, or try to make me want to quit. And as long as I don't, then I'm okay. Or you could get injured, of course, and get rolled back. But then you'd get to start another class. But at any rate, to make a long story short, I got through. There are parts of Hell Week I remember vividly, and parts I don't. One I do remember vividly was we were on a long run. I want to say it was an 18-mile run in the winter, and it was cold, and we were tired, and this was maybe halfway through Hell Week, and we've got jackets and all this shit on, cold weather gear, and we're slogging along, and we had to stop and do push-ups, and there was ice formed around the streets and places where we were going, and the instructors would say, break the ice, put your hands down in there, and do the push-ups, blah, blah, blah. Somewhere along the line, I lost my gloves. And I think I was just kind of babbling out loud. And there was this guy running next to me, Mike McDonald, who has since passed away. He stayed in and made a career out of it, by the way. Little tiny guy. One of the ones that if you looked at, you'd say, oh man, this guy's going to be going on the first day. But here he was, and he was running alongside of me, and he heard me. I don't know what I said, but I must have said something like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. My hands are freezing. And he said, take my gloves. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I can handle the cold. And he knew I was from Florida. He said, but when we get down to Puerto Rico, which is where we went to do the surface swimming part of it, because you couldn't do it out in Virginia in the winter. I don't do heat very well, so you got to help me. Mm. And I credit old Mikey with possibly keeping me in there, and getting me through. And I remember we got all the way to the end of Hell Week, and we were so excited. They told us to go into the one of the barracks there and sit down, and we sat there and we waited, and we're all congratulating ourselves. And the chief instructor, Master Chief Eugene Blaze, I believe his name was, came in and started screaming and yelling at us and saying, you guys aren't worth shit. You're the worst frogmen or worst people trying to be frogs that have ever come through the pipeline. You're shit, blah, blah, blah. And we're stunned. We're like,
you just passed the Hell Week.
Yeah. And he says, there's nothing that says we have to secure Hell Week today. We're going to do it all over again. Get your helmets on and get out the door right now. But before anybody could do anything, because we literally couldn't believe. And also we were delirious at this point, tired, hungry, we'd had 4 hours total sleep for the week.
The entire week, 4 hours.
Yeah, and not all at once. And there's a reason why they use sleep deprivation as enhanced interrogation. It works. But before we could do anything, one guy got up and quit and walked out. Now, keep this in mind. He had just finished Hell Week, but the thought of doing another one crushed him mentally, and he quit. And as soon as he walked out the door, Chief Blaze said, I was just kidding. Hell Week is secured. I can usually get somebody right at the very end. So, you know, when we talk about these things, and I don't talk about it too much, but I do tell people it's more up here. You know, any normal, physically active person can get through it. It's the mindset that makes you the winner. At least in my opinion.
Your mindset going through this. I can imagine that when you are functioning on 4 hours of sleep, at least in my experience, when I'm sleep deprived, I'm in this almost meditative state when I can be moving my body, I can be doing something, but I'm not there. How does it feel like to not sleep for the entire week and be burning like so many calories every day, having very little food, doing all of the exercises?
We did get food. That's a misconception that, or at least when I went through, I don't know what they do today, but they were savvy enough back then to realize that you just can't run a human body on an empty tank. So we did get to eat, but we would run or we would duck walk to wherever we were going to do, or carry during Hell Week, we were carrying our IBSs, the little rubber boats on top of our heads everywhere we went. And we'd get maybe 5 or 10 minutes to run into the chow hall. So obviously you just barged ahead of all the people that were in line and just grabbed all the food you could and put it in your pockets and everything so you could eat it later. And then you tried to eat something there, but then you had to be off again. I read somewhere that, you know, you were expending thousands of calories. I don't know how many. But, you know, you're just on the constant go. And one of the expressions are, I can't remember which instructor it was. It might have been Mike Spencer, who was always telling us, put your mind in neutral and get your ass in gear. I don't know if our mind was ever in neutral per se, because you have to spur yourself on. You have to think about these things, but there are big parts that are blurs. I sometimes talk with my old swim buddy and a couple of the other people that went through the same class, and we try to fill in each other's glaps in our memories, you know, as to, well, what happened then, or what came after that, you know, and everybody remembers a different part. Everybody's got their own story, and I don't think any two stories are alike, except to say that it gave you more of everything that sucked than you ever wanted in your life, and then some. Mm-hmm. So once you got through it, there was still some, you know, it was hard stuff. There were a lot of things left to do, but certainly didn't get harassed to the extent that you did up until and through Hell Week, at least back when I went through. Now today, you know, they know so much more about human performance and recovery, wind chill factors. You know, they have corpsmen constantly on the spot to be able to, you know, they know exactly how long they can keep somebody in cold water without there being a serious problem. I'm not sure they did in my day. They might have, I don't know, but if they did, they kept them hidden away so we didn't know they were there.
So what was the mindset, you doing probably one of the most difficult things that you've done up to that point in your life? What was going through your mind? Did you feel like, okay, I got this? Were there hesitations at any point?
Well, you have to keep telling yourself you've got it. Or I had to keep telling myself, I've got this. I can do this. I can do this. They can't make me quit. That was probably the thing that rang loudest in my head. They can't make me quit. I can make me quit, but they can't make me quit. And so as long as I kept that in mind, and you just stumble through, and trust me, I was far from the best candidate in our class. I was probably middle of the pack. which was a good place to be because you weren't on the instructor's radar. You weren't so good that they were trying to that they noticed you, and you weren't so bad that they noticed you. I was a poor runner, but a fantastic swimmer, and that kept me going because I'd been a sprinter in high school, not a long distance runner, and the long beach runs were just kicking my ass.
So the buds ended.
Well,
What
then you
happened
just have the
after?
rest of the training. And back in my day, you then went down to, because I went through a winter class, you went down to Roosevelt Roads, the naval base in Puerto Rico, and you started all of your surface swims. Starting off with short swims and then building up to longer and longer and longer, and you're free diving and learning to tie knots and things underwater. Because you had to build up that aspect of it, and lots of running too still, because Rosie Roads had some hills and stuff, and it was kind of a little jungly like around there, hot and humid. And we'd run we practiced little bits of reconnaissance and learning how to, still doing this beach surveys, still doing the same sort of thing that they did in World War II, because that's kind of a tradition. Still wore the same sort of little tan UD trunks. And we used to go to the island of Viegas, which was just off the coast of Puerto Rico. And that was a naval practice range and gunnery range. And God, I hate to admit it, but geez, we used to trample all over coral reefs and blow holes up in them. But this was in the day before, and the people of Viegas must have hated us. I mean, because there were people living there. But you're young and you're dumb and you don't think about those things, and you just do what you're told. So then from there, we came back and we were back up in Virginia for a little bit. And then where did we go next? We went to jump school next, went to Fort Benning, because the Navy didn't have its own jump school. And we went down there for 3 weeks. And then we went to the U.S. Navy Underwater Swimmer School in Key West, Florida. And that's where we learned all of our diving, the real diving, not just surface swims and stuff. So in those days, it was spread out over a lot of places. Today, you get all of that through the different phases, I believe, at Buds in Coronado, phase 1, 2, and 3. And they even added extra qualifications onto training, more than we had. I mean, the guys today are like super heroes compared to us. We were pretty primitive.
I probably wouldn't discount what you did there that easily. I can imagine, special forces is extremely difficult at any point of time to go through, like the training.
Well, the interesting thing is, we got to operate with some different people at different times from different countries. But when I was in Iraq in 2004 as a diplomat, my personal security detail was made up of several SEALs, ex-SEALs. They had gotten out of the Navy. Some Army Rangers, a guy from the Polish Special Forces. I think they were called Grom. I don't know for sure. He was really good. And we had several SAS people, both British and Australian and New Zealand, all ex-military. Oh, and we had PJs, and combat controllers, the Air Force Special Forces. We had some ex-Marines too, Marine Force Recon, just different, and it was interesting to see that the mindset, and let me just speculate wildly and say, if we had Spetsnaz people in there, we'd probably have found out it was all the same mindset. We all thought a lot alike. And I really enjoyed
What was that
that.
mindset? What do you think that was that separates those people?
It's just that never give up, can-do attitude, refuse to give up, stay in the fight. Nobody can make you quit but you.
Do you think it's a learned thing?
Okay, definitely. I don't think it's necessarily something you're born with. I mean, you know, they talk a lot today, the buzzwords about growth mindsets and static
Hmm.
mindsets. And if you can change from a static mindset to a growth mindset, then you know, I believe you can learn anything you put your mind to, but you got to decide you really want to do it. And this is where I get into issues when I'm talking with people. And I say, no, you just have to decide. You have to make that choice that this is what I want to do. Whatever it is you're talking about, it doesn't have to be in the military. It could be in business. It could be in life. It could be changing professions. It could
Hmm.
be, like you said, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And you may not do the things that you set out to do. You may not do all of them, but eventually you might. You know, it could take time.
I think the decisions, those decisions, they require confidence. You know, I need to have belief in myself in order to say, okay, I'm deciding to do it. I'm actually going to start out. But for a lot of folks, they're sitting on their couch that for the last, I know how many years, have been binge watching TV series, eating ice cream, and not doing any personal development, not running, not doing anything whatsoever. You know, it's a lot more challenging to say, okay, I decide to change my life around because they don't have that confidence.
There are a lot more distractions today, undoubtedly. I think probably the first step is you've really got to know yourself. You know, you got to know your strengths, your weaknesses, your dislikes, your likes, because everybody's got a full range of them. I know my weaknesses. I know my strengths. I know what I like. I know what I dislike. I know what pushes my buttons, and you know, if I feel like I'm coming into a situation where I'm likely to get my buttons pushed. I have to really be on guard, especially as a diplomat, you know, during my years as a diplomat, you know, not to get rattled, not to get angry. So you really have to know yourself well. I'm not sure you get to know yourself binge watching TV series and stuff. You do have to challenge yourself. You have to put it out there. And again, you have to learn how to deal with failure. My God, you're going to fail. If I had $1 for every time I failed, I could have retired a long time ago. And that's school, that's business, that's in the military. I mean, you name it. You know, life. It, it's all a. I mean, I'm just finishing. Actually, I thought I was writing my second book, and I realized I couldn't square the circle. Couldn't. I thought there's something wrong with the second book, and I realized I'm writing two books at the same time,
Mm.
and I'm trying to put it into one. So I've now split it. So I am writing two books at the same time. The second one's called Chasing Life, and the third one is called A Boomer Looks Back. And it's kind of reflecting on my life and my personal experiences. And one of the things I realized at 73 is, you know, the older I get, the less I know. I mean, when I was young, I thought I knew a lot.
Mm.
And it reminds me of that old Mark Twain. I believe it was Mark Twain that said, when I was a teenager, my father was the stupidest man in the world. But by the time I was in my 20s, I was amazed at how much he had learned. So, you know, as you get older, you realize the generations before you still have a lot to give you. That might be
Mm.
something that's missing today. I'm not sure we're giving, maybe we're trying to give to the younger generations, but we may not be good at doing it.
Yeah, I think the more we learn, the more we realize how ignorant we are. And you have this really interesting quote in the beginning of your book, Chasing Life, that goes like, "Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from poor judgment." Can you tell me about that?
Well, it all goes back to making mistakes. You know, you're going to make mistakes, but if you learn from them, that gives you the experience, one, not to do them again, and to build on them and keep going, so that you're I mean, nobody's perfect, absolutely not, least of all me. And I try, and you know, I've tried to instill that in my older son, and I'm working on it in my younger son too, that you know, you're going to make mistakes, and that you have to understand that there are consequences of actions. And you know, that when we're young, our brains, the part of the brain that can foresee consequences isn't completely developed. So that's why we do these crazy things. We can't really see the consequences.
What were the biggest learnings from your mistakes?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. I've made so many mistakes. Like I said, if I had $1 for every one, I could have retired years ago.
What were the big learnings you can recall right now?
Well, probably, let me see if I can put them into categories. Life categories would be that relationships require a lot of work. And just like everything else, you can't give up on them. You know, you have to keep working on them. And I'm still doing that. I'm learning more and more as I go along, even at 73. In school, academically, it was more learning how to ask the right questions. If I didn't ask the right questions, I got the wrong answers. In the military, I just wasn't listening to people. You know, I just thought I knew better than they did, and was quickly found out I didn't. Those are some of the first generic life lessons. I've had some other ones that are very private. I probably wouldn't want to have recorded anywhere. I'll keep those to myself to protect the innocent. And I'm not the innocent, but the others were. But yeah, they're. I mean, I had a couple of brushes with the law. Nothing super serious. Spent a night in jail in Spain for being drunk and disorderly and fighting.
Whoa. When was that? How long ago was it?
That was well after I got out of the Navy. That was we were backpacking around the world for a couple of years. Went to the running of the bulls.
No way, Pamplona! I've done that too. That is ridiculous.
And well, you know what it's like. I mean, it's just, you know. And I thought, how can they single us out? You know. But the thing was, we had long hair. And this was back in the days of Franco and the Guardia de Sevilla. Well, they're still around, the Guardia de Sevilla, but they were known as being really hardcore police in those days. And they didn't like hippies. And I guess that's what we looked like. Because as soon as we got out of the Navy, first I went to commercial flying school, and then I went back to university. And you just fall into the atmosphere and the environment that you're in. And everybody had long hair, and you know, I had had short hair all my life, and now I have no hair. So I'm glad I did get to grow it long for a little while. But that was, you know, that's what you did back then.
So you were in the Navy, you went back to school, then you did aviation school?
I did aviation school first. I was going to be a commercial pilot. And then I was about halfway through getting my commercial license. I already had my private license. I was working on my commercial and instrument license. And
how did that idea come to mind?
Actually, my swim buddy, he was 4 years older than me, my swim buddy in Buds. And he got out before I did. And his father had been a pilot. And that's all he ever wanted to be, was a commercial pilot. And that's what he talked about the whole time we were together. So he got out and went through flying school and got all of his licenses and was working his way up into the airlines. So I kind of followed in his footsteps. But as the war started ending, they were releasing all of these pilots from the military. They were all getting out, you know, Air Force pilots that had flown these huge B-52s and stuff, and jet jockeys, and you know, lots of people with fixed wing helicopter pilots. I mean, just tons of pilots were flooding the market. And it was my flight instructor told me one day, we were going up, we were flying, and he said, well, this will be the last time I go flying with you. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, I've taken a job as an air traffic controller. And I said, I thought you wanted to be a commercial pilot. He said, I did, but I don't have a chance. There's too many military pilots flooding the market. They're not going to hire me when they've got all these people with thousands of hours of experience. And he looked at me and he said, you should read the handwriting on the wall too, because you don't have a third of the hours that I have. He said, you're never going to get hired. So I thought, okay, he's probably got a point. If he's not going to do it, and he's more experienced than I am. So I went back to school and got my degree.
Mm-hmm. And
And
what was your degree on?
in geography.
In geography. Oh, that's right. Okay, so essentially, you spend about 2-3 months doing the business degree. You drop out. You go to the Navy. You do Navy SEALs, then and then you go through the flight through the aviation school, and then
Partway
you
through
end
the
up.
aviation school. Um, and then dropped out and went back to university. But it was an interesting way I chose the university I was going to. At this time, I was sharing an apartment with another guy who was also going through aviation school. And he didn't necessarily want to be a commercial pilot. He was lucky enough to have been born to very rich parents. And he already had his own 6-seater airplane, which he kept at the airport there. And this is a kid, 22 years old, and a brand new Corvette.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So when I said, I'm quitting, I'm going to go, back to school somewhere. And he said, where? And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe we were in just north of Miami at this flying school, Burnside Ott. It was in Opelika, Florida. I don't think it exists anymore. And I said, I don't know. I guess I'll go back to Tampa, to the University of South Florida. And he goes, I've been thinking about, he says, I don't need to be a commercial pilot, why don't let's go somewhere else and go to school. And I said, okay, where do you want to go to school? He goes, I don't know. You want to go out west? And I said, yeah. So we threw, the stuff we had in the back of the Corvette and took the money we had. Now he had an allowance, of course. And so it wasn't like he could just dip into, gobs and gobs and gobs of money, but his dad paid for pretty much for everything, but he wanted to be a little bit on his own. So we said we'd start driving west. And when we had $50 a piece left in our pockets, that's where we would stop. So we were coming up on Phoenix, Arizona. And Corvettes drink a lot of gas. And even if gas was cheap in those days, to drive from Florida to Arizona took most of our, and staying in motels and eating and stuff. So anyway, we said, it looks like Phoenix will be the place. So we thought, all right, we got to find jobs, we got to find a place to live, and then we can apply to a school. So as we're approaching Phoenix, we're tuning in radio stations and we hear about this 48-hour rock festival, nonstop, that was going on at a place called Big Surf. And we thought, man, we can't be hearing this right. Big Surf in Arizona. And what it was this artificially created place that generated giant waves and you could surf on them. And it was like a little Hawaii in the middle of Arizona. I don't know if it still exists. At any rate, they were looking for people, to work. So we drove right there. I mean, we didn't have a place to stay yet or anything, and got jobs selling Coke, selling beers, just, whatever they wanted us to do, cleaning up. So we made a fair amount of money in the 48 hours. And then we went looking for a place to stay. And this is where he then eventually had to tap into his dad, because they wanted a first month, the second month, and a deposit, which we didn't have, but his dad forked over the money for us. And then we applied to school and got into school. And so I went to Mesa Community College, and then I got a scholarship, an academic scholarship, believe it or not, dumb student, to Arizona State University, and went to school there.
And how long did you spend in school? How was your journey?
I was getting up
as a
to
student?
my junior year, which is the third year at university. Excuse me. And by that time, I had another roommate. My rich roommate I'd come out with from Florida had fallen in love with a girl, and they moved in together. And I needed a roommate now because I couldn't afford the rent by myself. And there was a guy that sat next to me in sociology class that I got along with really well. And he was bitching one day about his roommate. I said, whoa, hey, my roommate's moving out. Why don't you move in with me? So, we didn't want to live on campus. We wanted to live off campus where we didn't have any rules or anything. So we did. And it turns out his parents were from Sweden. So he's the reason I'm here today. And we're still in contact too. So we decided to take a junior year abroad, and we started looking for places. And he said, well, I got all this family in Sweden. My parents are from Sweden. Well, I believe his dad was from Sweden. I think his mom was born in the US, but she was of Swedish parents. So we found a program at Stockholm University, and over we came, and we did that. And then we set off in what I call the Nomad Years. And that's when we were backpacking and traveling around in the running of the bulls and
Which brings us back to running with the bulls in Pamplona.
Crazy stuff.
Did you do it in Pamplona or in another city? Pamplona, I believe, is the main place where it all originated.
Yes, that's where it all originated. Don't know what it's like today. I actually haven't been back there since the mid-70s, something like that. That was about when it happened. And I actually never got to run because we kept partying all night, every night.
That's what happens.
Yeah, and it's an 8 o'clock call.
That's
very
right.
early to get up in the morning, and we kept saying, yeah, we'll do it. So the last night we had decided, all right, we're just going to go get something to eat, not drink too much, go back to our campsite and go to bed, and we'll run the last day.
That was the plan.
We ended up meeting a couple of the local senoritas.
Of course.
And, one thing led to another, and we got absolutely shit-faced. And that's where we got into the fight with these guys and got arrested. So I spent the last night in the jail in Pamplona there, and they let us out about 9 in the morning. Of course, by then it was too late. I mean, the running itself doesn't take all that long. So never did it, but I thought for some reason the universe didn't want me to. So I'm a big believer in these sort of things.
I went to run in Pamplona about 3 years ago. It was 2017. It was a really interesting experience. So the way it begins right now, I'm not sure how it was back then. It begins with San Fermin. So they have this massive celebration.
Yeah,
with
it's
sangria.
The festival of San Fermin. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the first day when it all starts, there's like a little bit of a parade with music and with the local mayor, I think, announcing that the celebration is about to begin. But then there are a lot of really young people just throwing sangria everywhere, and you wear the white dress,
the white and the red.
Exactly. Is that what you did?
Yeah. And we got what the heck was it called? First thing we did was buy a Buddha bag, to fill with wine so we could carry it around with us and drink wine. These little skin bags. Yeah. Fun times. And those are the ones that I'm writing about in A Boomer Looks Back. And I had all of these accounts in the second book that I was writing, Chasing Life. And it just didn't fit in very well. So I pulled all of those more personal accounts out and put it into the third book.
What got you to writing right now? Like, why?
That's funny because I hated writing when I was in school. I don't think I ever made a good grade in English. But at university, I really upped my game, leveled up, and learn to write. But then as a diplomat, you spend your life writing. You're writing cables, reports, action plans, talking points, you name it. Forward-looking memos, blah, blah, blah. And years of doing that got me back interested in writing again. And then now, I mean, that's really what I do at 73. I write a lot. I was doing public speaking, but there's none of that going on now. I just constantly looking for new adventures and new challenges. I I've just applied for one now. I know I don't have a snowball's chance in hell of getting into it, but I work on the old principle: if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's right.
So I've applied to a new reality show that's going to be here in Sweden. It's based on a British program for selection to the SAS. So Sweden has some really good special forces, SOG, they're called, and they're having a reality show where they're taking civilians to see if they can pass 1 week of training with them, with lots of physical and mental harassment. And I looked at that and I thought, actually, somebody sent me the information about it, said you might be interested in this. And of course, these are all young. And, in reality, they would probably kick my ass from left to right and every day of the week and twice a day on Sunday. But the old warrior in me wants to try again. So I applied. I haven't heard anything from him, and I'm pretty sure I never will.
I would definitely throw you in the mix. With your background, you've done so many fascinating things.
But at my age, I looked at they've got a commercial for it on TV, and they're all pretty young people, and I still think I have the mindset. That's the advantage. Right? I know I have the mindset.
You've done the Swedish version of Survivor. Can you tell me about that? How did that go? And
that was fun too. Well, a little lead up to it. First, I'd been working for the multinational force and observers in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. And my contract was coming to an end. And what I did down there was we monitored the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. So we were bouncing back and forth between the two countries, inspecting military bases, making sure that they were staying within their levels they were supposed to be, both sides. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, my contract ends because I was turning 70, and that was the cap, the age cap. You couldn't work past 70. So I was reading the Swedish newspaper online. My family was back here in Stockholm. And they had this ad saying they were bringing back, they call it Robinson here, like from Robinson Crusoe, and that they were going back to the original concept because it had run for years and it had gotten sillier and sillier and sillier as the years went by. Then it was Robinson, the Love Edition, Robinson Singles, VIP. You know how these things go.
They gotta milk that show.
Yeah, it was less and less survival and more social games and pacting and stuff like that. So, but they had stopped airing it for about 3 or 4 years, and they decided to bring it back. And they said, we're going back to the original concept. And I thought,
actual survival.
Well, yeah, it turns out it was still pretty much a lot of social pacting and stuff, but not to the extent it is now. Will be the 4th season coming up this year, and each season has gotten more progressively social, games and stabbing each other.
Did you apply? How do you get in?
Well, it was quite simple. It said, if you're interested, click on this link. I clicked on the link, filled in all the information, sent it off. Totally forgot about it. 2 months later, I was doing my rotation as mission control officer. So I'm sitting back at headquarters at the base with all this computer and radio comms gear around me. And we've got 5 missions out in the field, 1 in Israel and 4 throughout the Sinai. And I'm, in radio contact with them and computer contact and monitoring them real time and stuff. So I don't normally answer my Swedish cell phone, my mobile, because I Skype with my family. But I did have my cell phone with me, and I had stopped answering it because it was always telemarketers. Are you happy with your, your TV provider or your internet provider? And I would go, God damn it, I'm in the Sinai. Leave me alone. And it rang as I'm sitting there at the controls, and for some reason, I answered it. I have no idea why. I wasn't expecting a phone call. I don't think I was thinking. I just thought, well, maybe they're trying to get through to me on my phone because they can't get through to me through all the other comms. Answered the phone, and I hear this nice female voice in Swedish saying, hi, my name is, and I'm calling from, and it sounded just like at the beginning of a telemarketer. And I was so close to saying, would you stop calling me, please? I'm not interested. But before I could say that, she said, from the TV program Robinson. And I just kind of stopped. I said, oh, okay. And they said, we'd like to cast you. We'd like you to come for the interviews. I said, well, I'm in Egypt. They said, we know that you put that on there, but when will you be home? I said, well, I'll be back in June, but I'll only be back for a week. And then I'm flying to Los Angeles to celebrate my 70th birthday. So I've got a week. And I said, all right, we'll schedule you in. So I went to one interview for 2 or 3 hours. And the woman said, okay, so, we'll schedule your next interview for blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be in Los Angeles.
How was the interview like? What did they ask you?
Well, they just asked me,
survival
they
show.
put up a camera. It's just one woman to begin with. Put up a camera and just asked you lots of questions, kind of like we're doing now. Tell me about your life, what you've done. They'd throw a few questions out. What would you do about this? What do you think about that? Sometimes they try to put you in the hot seat. Okay, who do you vote for? Which political party? And I would say, I don't answer questions like that. That's my business.
It's funny that on the survival show, they do not seem to actually check people for their survival abilities.
Well, no, they don't, apparently, because when I got there, some of the people were, you had to pass a swimming test. And I'd already told them my background. And I said, seriously, you want me to pass the swimming test? And they said, yeah, you have to prove that you can swim 50 meters. And I said, okay. So, they said, you have to do it. So I did a video of that and sent it in. And then I had another set of interviews where first it was the production company that was dealing with it. And then the actual TV station came in, the people that manage the program or direct the program. And they asked a different set of questions. And then they sent me to see a psychologist who said, asked why I wanted to do it, in particular at my age. And then a full medical examination. So those were all the things. And I got it all done in 1 week, went off to Los Angeles, and still didn't really think I was going to get in. And got an email while I was there and saying, yep, you're in. So
that's so cool.
Yeah.
What was your reaction?
You weren't allowed to say to tell anybody anything. Well, my wife wasn't really happy that I was going. And so I waited till we were at Universal Studios, and we were all having fun and everything, and we're in a long queue to wait for some attraction. And I said, are you in a good mood? And she said, yeah. And I said, good. I said, because I got selected for Robinson. And she said, because she was worried about how they would portray me, because you sign a contract that allows them to pretty much clip and combine things the way they want. And you don't have any control over it. And that's why now I'm always very careful saying, I'd like to see some of the, or I'd like to hear, whenever I've done podcasts before. And this is the first one I've done remotely, so this is an interesting experience too.
Do you feel like you got some negative experience with people not portraying you correctly? Or
no, on the contrary. But I did see how other people got portrayed. I think I came out of there smelling like roses, to be honest with you. If you go to YouTube, and Google Rick LaRoche Robinson, you'll probably find a few clips. I doubt you have access to Swedish TV, but they're still on some of the Swedish TV stations on the whole season. But after this, you if you're interested, you can do it, and you'll see some of the things. I think they portrayed me very well. Have absolutely nothing to complain about. But I know some other people did feel like they were portrayed not unfairly. I mean, because you do, if they show a stupid statement, you made the statement. It's just they
Exactly.
chose where to show it. They didn't make you say it.
Totally. Or they might take it out of context. I went through an acceleration program in the Silicon Valley, and it was a startup training program. And when I was going through it, they decided, oh, let's do a docu-series about it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I had a little bit of experience being just in, a part of this massive thing. We have around 25 people who were going through the program, and then we had probably like 20 people crew just recording it. And then I ended up looking back at the program itself. There were like 10 main cast, and then us. I was the us part, but I looked at what we actually did and what ended up happening, how the final product turned out to be. So the idea for the show is that we had founders of billion-dollar companies, really incredible people with incredible stories, and we're doing so many interesting things. And the stories that ended up making the TV show were some romance stories that weren't even true. It wasn't that there was like a romance going on, and and yeah, I looked back at it and it's like that's a little disappointing. There's just so much meat in terms of what was filmed.
Right. No, it's amazing. As I said, looking back at it, I'm happy. I mean, yeah, you do see how some of your fellow competitors stab you in the back and say bad things about you.
Oh,
You don't see that, of course, until it's
that's
actually
right.
aired. And you don't know they've said these things about you. And
Mm.
of course, people made fun of me because of my age, but that's okay. I mean, I was, I thought, very careful not to talk negatively about anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I told myself I'm not going to do because I don't know how they'll use this. I'm not going to talk politics. I'm not going to, they would ask me questions about Trump. They would ask this, ask that, Swedish politics. I mean, the whole thing was done in Swedish, of course. Um, and, there were people that made fun of my Swedish because I have an accent, but
Mm.
hey, all in all, it was a really great experience. I made it through to the combining of the two teams. And then in the first of competition that we had, as where you're competing, just for yourself, not for a team, I lost my balance standing on a pole. And in the end, the medical staff there said, you can't compete anymore. We're going to send you home. So that was it. I was out.
Well, because of your
But
injury.
yeah, because of my injury, yeah. And then I ended up having to get a complete knee replacement. So I have a metal or a titanium knee joint now in
Because
my
of that
left knee.
experience.
Well, that it's cumulative. It was wear and tear from the military, from playing rugby. I played rugby all my life, and I had at that point 13 operations on my left knee
Whoa.
and 5 on my right knee. So with the knee replacement surgery, that's a total of 19 knee operations, and I'll have to get my right knee replaced too. I mean, it's arthrosis, it's wear and tear. I've ruptured my anterior cruciate ligament. I don't know how many times. So just another word of advice I'd give to young people: take care of your body. You may
That's
need
right.
it longer than you realize.
That's an important. That's definitely an important advice. And how serious was Survival's show compared to everything else you've done in the past? Because you've done some hardcore stuff.
Well, yeah, no, it wasn't anything like, for example, I went to jungle warfare school also, where we did a lot of survival training there in the jungles in Panama. It was nothing like that because always in the back of your mind, or at least in the back of my mind, I know it's a TV show. You know, they're film crews that are constantly rotating
Mm.
and coming and filming us, and um, you know, as I said, I had to tell some of the younger people, you're not going to die. Yes, you're hungry as hell, but you're not going to die. They'll never let you die. There's a full medical staff just out of sight, and one guy ripped his biceps tendon really
Whoa.
badly, and they medevaced him very quickly. and he was a stunt man too. Really good guy, and he was doing quite well, so he was pretty bummed out about it. But yeah, no, we were hungry, very, very, very hungry. I don't know if it was on purpose or just by accident, but the particular small island we were on in Fiji, it must have been right between the growing seasons. Nothing was really ripe. We had cassava, and that was pretty much what cassava and coconuts, and we weren't getting any protein. We did have water, so that was a plus. But there were no bananas ripe or anything.
Are you just thrown on an island and told, okay, you survived the longest you can, here's some obstacles, or
well, yeah,
how
you're
does the experience
taken
go?
there, and you do these competitions, and you can win food in the competitions too. So, but we kept losing, so we didn't win much food. But eventually, all of a sudden, one day, there was a goat tied to a tree outside of our little place. I mean, they knew we needed protein, we needed meat. We just couldn't keep going. You wouldn't, because we didn't have the energy in the competitions. Even though they'd give you some fruit just before the competition and some fresh fruit and some fruit juice for a sugar rush to power you through whatever you were going to do. But I lost 11 kilos.
That's a lot. In how long?
4 or 5 weeks, something like that.
Oh, that's how long you were there for? So it's not,
Well, if you're there the whole time, you're there longer. You're much longer.
How long is the whole period?
From start to finish, must be. Well, it had to be. I guess I probably left a week or maybe 10 days before it was over, something like that.
Mm.
And now I'm including also the time that you get to Fiji. You spend a few days before you actually get out to where the competition is. So that's not a particularly hard period. Those few days you're there on the main island. But yeah.
So you were surviving for a while, huh?
Yeah, yeah. We talked about a lot of different things. We haven't really touched on the diplomat part.
That's something I would really love to learn about.
Okay. Again, this was one of these crazy things. If you had ever asked me as a young man, do you want to be a diplomat? No. I was teaching just north of San Diego in Carlsbad, California, at the Army Navy Academy, which is like a prep school, a boarding school for young men of, let's say, who that might be their last stop before they go to a juvenile home or something, and they've all got rich parents because it costs an arm and a leg to send them. So it's a military school, and the idea is to put some discipline. And my wife was going to work one day, and she heard Colin Powell, who was the Secretary of State at the time, advertising for people to take the Foreign Service exam to work for the State Department and be a diplomat. And she told me about it, and I said, yeah, you got to go to Harvard or Yale or all of these, Stanford, and that's the type of people they're looking for. And she said, no, it sounded pretty genuine. He wanted people from all walks of life, all ages. And I was older at the time. I mean, I wasn't, a young kid out of college. So I took the test, and first it was a written test, an all-day written test. And then I went to Washington for an all-day oral exam, which went on, and I mean, they just grill you on everything. And they don't really expect you to give the right answers. They just want to see how you react. Are you like the deer in the headlights?
What type of questions do they ask you?
Well, they'll just give you hypothetical things. Well, you're a political officer in some made-up country, blah blah blah, and you are you've been told that this particular group of people would like to meet with you because they feel like they're they're being treated unfairly by the larger tribe in this country, So would you meet with them? And if so, why? So, and they're made up scenarios, and you
Mm-hmm.
would try and explain why you would meet with them. And then they would say, okay, so now you're meeting with them. You've had a good meeting. Now what would you do? And then suddenly one of them would hand a piece of paper to the other one and say, oh, we've just found out that group you met with actually is a splinter group from Hezbollah. And that's a terrorist organization. We're not allowed to have any contact with them. What do you do now? Yeah, they're just constantly changing the.
And that's happening for the entire day, right?
Yeah, well, no, that's during the 1-on-3. There are 3 people there that grill you. You do role plays. You analyze budgets. You write. Oh my God, you write. There, all kinds of things that you do. And then they put you in a room. There were 19 of us that took the oral exam. So the oral exam is kind of like Hell Week. That's the big watershed. Say maybe 50% of the people pass the written exam that take it, or maybe more. But most people fall during the oral exam. So we're sitting in there, and they start calling people out one by one, and we don't know what's going on, because you don't see these people again. Are they calling the people who passed first, or the people who failed first? Or is it random? We don't know. So I was called about midway through. And soon as I got out of the group and out of earshot where they could hear, the instructor turned to me and offered his hand and said, well, let me be the first to congratulate you. But he said it in such a non-excitable manner that my brain already finished the sentence, for having come this far, but unfortunately, you didn't pass the. And he said, for having passed the oral exam. And I was speechless. I almost said, are you shitting me? But I thought, no, I better not say that now. And so then I was taken right away to a security interview. And that went on for several hours to get my security investigation. I later found out we were only 3 that passed out of the 19. And the other 2, one was a civilian attorney and the other was a JAG officer, a military attorney. So, yeah. And then I waited because it takes a while to get the security clearance. You can't go to training until you have a clearance. And I guess it was maybe 6 months, 5 months, something like that. And again, they called me when I was right in the middle of teaching a class, and I have my cell phone, and I don't normally answer it during class. And I wasn't expecting a phone call from them. And they called and said, we have a class for you. We'd like you to start in January. So, and this was like November. So I said, oh my God. And they said, well, will you accept? And they said, we can't give you your salary yet. Right now, we need to know, do you accept? And I said, yes. And they said, we'll call you back in a couple of days after we've assessed your, everything else to offer you a competitive salary, which they did. And I was quite happy because it was a lot more than I was making as teaching. So, yeah. So.
Were you a full-time teacher then?
Yeah.
During the time?
Yep. Teaching geography and intramural sports.
It's pretty crazy how many things you just applied for and have done. There are a lot of those challenges right in front of you. It feels like from the third person's perspective that things that are exciting, they're interesting, they're new is something that you want to try out and you want to have experienced.
I still do, and the problem is that the challenges and the adventures are getting fewer and far between. I'd love to go on some sort of an epic quest, as part of an expedition or a trip or have another physical challenge. I can, but I don't know of any that are going.
What would you do? Where would you go?
Recently, they ran a TV program here called Expedition, but it was only celebrities in Sweden, and they took them up to base camp at Everest.
Mm.
And it was a sort of one of these reality things. Although there wasn't any social gaming or anything, but I'm not a celebrity. I mean, nobody knows me from a hole in the wall, so there's no one is the least bit interested in seeing me go to base camp or whatever other type of adventure.
Are you interested in just going to base camp anyways?
Oh, of course.
I have a number of friends who were on this podcast that went to base camp and that actually go relatively frequently. So I can definitely put you in touch. It's whatever you set your mind to.
Oh yeah, definitely. That would be cool. One of my fellow competitors that I'm still in touch with from Robinson recently, within the last year or so. I don't know if she went all the way to base camp, but there's a lot of aspects that go into that. Part would be my knee or my knees, for example, but I think I could power through that. Could I make the final assault on Everest? Who knows? I mean, there was some guy that did it with 2 artificial legs, so anything's possible.
I think right now they time it super well. You have the Sherpas, you have really good planning involved, and I heard that tourists go to Everest. I'm wondering why Everest in particular is of interest, because it seems like it's a little bit of an artificial goal. Oh, the tallest mountain in the world. It's not the deadliest one. It's not the most difficult one to climb technically. I'm just curious if Everest has a significant.
It's the most well known, I guess, and also because it's the tallest. Here's a question for you: what was the tallest mountain in the world before Mount Everest was discovered?
I wouldn't know. What is it?
Mount Everest.
Really?
A trick question. Of course it was.
Oh,
yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, of course. That is a trick question. No, I think there is the tallest mountain in terms of like the altitude is one of was it in one of the poles? I'm not sure because the Earth is not spherical exactly, and I think there is like a taller mountain compared to the sea level or something.
Well, one of the I think actually, if you want to go from base to top, that technically the tallest mountain in the world is the mountain that the big island of Hawaii sits on. It's a volcano, but it extends from the bottom of the ocean all the way up to, and there's snow up on the upper altitudes. I don't know how tall Mauna Loa is, the volcano there, if that's the name of it. I can't remember. It's been ages since I was in Hawaii, but I read somewhere that is actually from the ocean floor above the surface to the top is taller than Mount Everest. But there are others that are equally hard, if not harder climbs, K2 and some others. Climbing hasn't really fascinated me. I don't know why. Maybe it's jumping out of airplanes and stuff was satisfied me for heights and things.
I can imagine.
But no, I just like some challenges. I'd like to, if there's anybody out there listening and you're looking for a member, trust me, Knock knows how to get hold of me. So,
what other adventures would you do?
Jungle stuff, rafting, diving, you name it. Even maybe a lot of trekking. Just I don't know. Just the problem is, or it's not a problem. I shouldn't say it that way. Let me rephrase that. I'm 73, but I have a 14-year-old son. I'm not like a 73-year-old who all the kids have grown up and flown the coop. So I still have a lot of responsibilities that keep me here. But the gypsy in me, the wanderlust, the adventurer, that'll never die, most definitely. So I keep hoping, and when I see when an opportunity does come by, I apply for it. Maybe one day somebody will take me. Who knows?
So Well, definitely share those opportunities with me, and I'll see who I happen to know. For myself, I have a bucket list of crazy adventures. I want to go to kite surf in Antarctica, which is very unusual, and I have a list of experiences like this. I'd love to see Earth from space
Yes,
in my
I'll
lifetime.
jump on that in a second.
Do you have a bucket list? Do you have a list of things you want to do?
I do, but mine are maybe more modest, and they're often places because I've done a lot of things, but there's still a lot of places I haven't been. I would like to go to Tierra del Fuego, the very southern tip of South America.
Mm.
Um, I'd like to go to Svalbard, which is way up in the Arctic Ocean. I'd like to go to Antarctica. And when I was a diplomat in New Zealand, my I was a consular officer on that particular posting, and I was responsible for Americans, scientists and researchers who were working down there. So if they needed their passports renewed or they had some sort of problem at home, so I was their communications person for that. But they always flew to New Zealand, so I never got a chance to go down to the Arctic, and I kept trying or the Antarctic. I kept trying and trying to hitch a ride on a plane. I said, just land. Let me just get off and step foot, and then I'll get back on the plane. But yeah, it didn't work out. So that I've always wanted to ride the Trans-Siberian Express, and I've always wanted to do it in the winter. And that stems from the old movie Dr. Zhivago that I saw, and that which was filmed in Canada. But
No way.
well, yeah, you didn't make movies in the Soviet Union in the early 70s. I think it was around 72 or something. But it just, fascinated me. And it started an interest in the Soviet Union that I had for a long time. In fact, as a diplomat, I bid several times for different posts in the Soviet, in Russia as it is, when I was a diplomat. But
How does the life of a diplomat look like exactly? So you got accepted.
oh
Um,
yeah, well then you submit what they call bids.
is there a position, any particular thing that you get to do as a diplomat?
Well, yeah. There's a lot. There are different cores. There are different things that you can do. You could be a political officer, an economic officer, a consular officer, a public affairs officer, or a management officer. And those are the main divisions. And they're open at embassies and consulates around the world. So what you do is it's like applying for a job. When you're finishing a posting, you start looking for the new job openings across the embassies and the consulates, something that's in your cone, or in your specialty, your area of specialty. Uh, okay, is the timing right? Do you need to learn a language? But you so you basically bid on these positions. Your first two assignments are made by other people. You tell them, you give them a list of 10 or 15 places, and my first assignment was Surabaya, Indonesia, at the consulate there. So I had to go learn Indonesian for
No
six
way.
months. Um,
How is your Indonesian?
it sucks right now. It's funny, every once in a while things come back. I mean, that was 2003 and four. The last podcast I did, somebody asked me something, and I said, "Not yet." And it just suddenly made me think of Indonesia and the language Bahasa Indonesia, because they rarely say no. They say belum. Have you been to the U.S.? Belum, not yet. So it's always this sort of underlying, but maybe I will one day. And that was an expression that I liked, belum. But otherwise, I found it a very wordy language. Lots of lots of words to say something very simple. Um, I was trying to think of something. For example, to make a plural of a noun, they just say the noun twice. So instead of saying cars, car and cars, they say car, car.
That's so funny. That's an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, I guess. I mean, why not? Someone told me that the word for whale in Mongolian, I had a colleague who had served at the embassy there, was big fish when you translate it literally.
Yeah.
We're just a
And it's not a
landlocked
fish, right? It's
country.
a mammal.
Yeah, it's a mammal, but I mean, to them, anything that swims in the ocean is a fish, and therefore that's a
The big
big
fish.
fish. So, um,
How many languages have you learned by now?
actually, those were the only ones. And Indonesian is very close to Malaysian. And I know Swedish, of course. I was posted here at the embassy as well. And Swedish is very close to Norwegian. And if I try very hard, I can sometimes understand about, I don't know, 50% of Danish if they speak it slowly.
Mm. Don't you speak Spanish in
No,
in
I grew
Florida?
up in Tampa, a Spanish-speaking town, and I had lots of, Spanish-speaking friends. I studied one term in high school. I studied French one term. I studied German one term. But they were, that is basically reading knowledge in those
Hmm.
days, not so much emphasis on speaking. I felt very ignorant and undereducated when I was living when I first came to Europe, and everybody spoke 2 or 3 languages well. So um,
What was your second deployment
after
for?
Surabaya, I volunteered to go to Iraq to be embedded with the military. They were looking for people that had been in the military,
Mhm.
uh, and I had one of the 4 qualifications they were looking for, and that was that I'd been in the military. But it was not a popular assignment for a lot of people in the State Department. So,
And that was a war zone during the time, right?
oh yeah, yeah, it was during this right at the end of the CPA, the Coalition Provincial Authority, when control of Iraq was handed back to the Iraqis, but it was also right at the beginning of the insurgency, which just got progressively worse. So it was living in a combat zone the whole time because I was not at the embassy. I was embedded with the Marines and then later with the Army in Najaf, South Central Iraq, which is the sort of the headquarters, if you will, of Shia Islam, kind of like the Vatican for Catholics. All the grand ayatollahs were down there in Najaf. So it was an
And
interesting place.
and you volunteered. I can imagine it was an extremely dangerous place during the time. What was going through your mind?
Challenge, adventure, excitement, um, and also trying to do something good. I mean, I I grew to know the people of Najaf. I am still in contact with my interpreter because I didn't speak Arabic, so that was one of the qualifications that I didn't have. And I hired a young man um, right out of university. He had a degree in engineering. His English was good, and he was a very savvy guy. And eventually, I helped him get into the U.S. Well, not just me. There were a couple of other officers that he worked with to help him too. But we all got together, and he's now a U.S. citizen. And he got a master's degree from, I think it was either George Washington or Georgetown University. So he did very well. And
That,
So we're still in contact. He's married, has a baby. I won't mention his name because he's actually back in Najaf right now, and doing the paperwork that he needs to bring his wife and infant daughter back to the U.S.
it's amazing that people get to have opportunities like this to have safety, to have education, to have laws. I can imagine those are things that we take for granted a lot of the times, and in other countries, they're privileges. They are not there.
No, and when I first got to Najaf, I was amazed at I guess the lack of basic things. And at first I attributed it to the war, but then as I began to talk with the Najafis, a lot of it was just sheer neglect from Saddam because he was a Sunni and he didn't like the Shia. course. So, without going down the political rabbit hole, it was very interesting. I learned a lot there. Learned a lot about Islam. I learned a lot about just people in general.
How did that experience expand your understanding of the world?
A lot. I didn't have a lot of Middle Eastern experience before that, other than passing through, as a tourist, going to Cairo or something like that. And that helped me a lot when I later volunteered to work for the Multinational Force and Observers. I spent a total of 3 years in the Sinai doing that position too. So,
what's the position exactly?
well, basically, when Israel and Egypt signed the peace accord, the Camp David Accords, they agreed, along with the United States, the three countries agreed to create an organization that would monitor the peace treaty. They did not, none of the countries wanted the UN to do it. They wanted to create an independent organization. And so they created the Multinational Force and Observers, which is based out of Rome. And I think there are like 16 countries that contribute money, personnel, military to it, from all over the world, from Latin America, from New Zealand, from Australia, Canada, the US, several European countries. And the idea is we're kind of in between Egypt and Israel as a buffer. We have two camps, one in the north, one in the south. And we keep them talking with each other. Every so often we sit down, not me personally, but the negotiators higher up, and they sit and they talk and they discuss what problems are going on. Well, you had too many tanks over there. Well, yeah, but you had too many armored personnel carriers over there. Okay, we'll move them back, blah, blah, blah. But as long as you're talking with each other, you're not fighting. And, there hasn't been a war between the two since, well, I guess it was the Yom Kippur War, 73, 74, whenever it was. That was the last.
So they're just bringing in the third party to mediate, to talk to. It sounds like a pretty effective way.
And we monitor to see, there are different zones, and let's say, without going into too much detail, the zone closest to the Israeli border is not allowed to have any Egyptian tanks in it. This is by agreement in the peace treaty. This is what they hammered out at the Camp David Accords. So if we see a tank in that area, an Egyptian tank, that's a violation. Same thing on the other side. The Israeli tanks are not allowed to be within a certain distance of the border. And if we see an Israeli tank, it's a violation, and we report it back to Rome, and then Rome reaches out to, the different countries.
Is it an interesting job?
Very interesting, extremely. I'd go back and do that again too, but 70 is the cutoff point. For some reason, they think once you're 70, you got nothing to contribute.
Well, now you get to do survival training and other crazier things in other areas of the world.
Yeah, but as I said, it's getting harder and harder to find the challenges. I know they're out there, and if I'm still fit and healthy, which I hope I will be by the time my 14-year-old is at university, then I'll be able to get out and do some stuff. But it's certainly not fair to. I've left my wife. I mean, the 3 years I was in the Sinai, she was raising him as a geographically single parent. I mean, I would come home every 2 or 3 months on R&R or on vacation. So I wasn't away 3 years in a row, but still, it's a very hard burden.
I can imagine.
And she was finishing her university degree at the time, so it made it super tough.
And what's next for you? You're working on 2 books right now.
Yeah, what's next for me? Hopefully waiting for this virus stuff to disappear so we can start traveling again and doing things. It's felt kind of strange, and especially me. I'm in the so-called target group for the people over 70. I only recently started going back to the gym. I stayed away from the gym for a couple of months, but I have been going out early in the mornings, walking and running, and there's an outdoor gym and working out there. I'm kind of hoping this, I mean, I've had no problems, absolutely none. And I've tested twice and, it's been negative. Doesn't mean I won't get it, of course, knock on wood. But I think it's going to be a real eye-opener for societies around the world because, I mean, viruses have always been around and viruses are always going to be around. And once this one is brought under control, there'll be a new one at some point in time. But it's a real reflection of our lifestyles. The people that are dying, no matter what age, most of them have some sort of underlying conditions. They've got high blood pressure. They've got cardiovascular problems. They're obese. They've got diabetes. They've got pulmonary problems. And I'm not faulting these people. It's just a reflection of the way we live in the Western world, and maybe even in other areas too. I can't speak for them. I mean, look at how many people are overweight. And like you said, people don't exercise. They binge on this and that. So maybe it'll make us stop and think, we need to take better care of ourselves. We need to eat right. We need to get 7 or 8 hours of quality sleep. We need recovery time. We exercise, we need recovery time. You got to recharge your batteries.
And you're going through the peak performance program right now. And
I just finished the 0 to dangerous. Yeah. So I'm taking a little break before I do anything else. I may do some more. But that was the first thing I'd done with them. And I was really keen to do that. And I found it very useful.
And one of the core concepts they teach is active recovery, taking care of yourself, getting sleep. And it doesn't seem like it's a popular culture in the world, especially amongst higher achievers and people who want to ambitiously just go out there and pursue life.
There's this myth that, high performers, I get by on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. That's all I need, and then I'm productive the rest of the time. And that's just a crock of shit. I mean, maybe they do for a while, but at some point they're going to, you can't burn the candle at both ends. It just doesn't work. And that's one thing I credit my good health for now is I've always, with the exception of Hell Week, gotten, maybe it actually taught me how valuable sleep was. I hadn't really thought about that, but I've always gotten a good 7 or 8 hours of sleep. I've never had a problem. My biorhythms are pretty set. I get up early, not because I want to, I just wake up early. And I end up going to bed earlier than probably most people do. Unless we have people over or we're off somewhere or at a party or something, but I see no reason to sit up super late. As I start to get tired, I don't fight it. I just head off to bed.
Anything you do to keep yourself mentally sharp?
That's the writing and the reading. I read as much as I can. I listen to podcasts, all kinds of podcasts.
You have hundreds of books in the shelves behind you.
I read every one of them, to some of them a couple of times. And I'm always, I'm eager to learn. I just think you need to keep learning the whole time, because as I said, the older you get, the more you realize, the less you know.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on. It was a super insightful conversation. So much to uncover and so many questions I would have otherwise asked. Is there any lesson that you would like the listeners to walk away with?
If you make that choice to make a change or to accomplish something, you can do it if you're willing to put in the hard work to do it. It won't be easy. but you can do it. You can do anything you set your mind to. Now, obviously, that's within reason of your physical requirements. I mean, I'm never going to be an NBA player that can soar through the air like Michael Jordan, not at 170. So, you know, but I'm talking about realistic things. Yeah. If I could get into naval special warfare, if I could become a diplomat, if I could do survivor at 70, I am no better, no smarter, no stronger than anybody else. It's just, I decided I wanted to do these things, and I was willing to put in the hard work. Just never give up.
Hell yeah, that's such a powerful message.
No, I mean, I, I'm not alone in saying that. There are many, many people, that say that, but it's true. You just have to decide you're going to do it. That's the very first step. Maybe even the most important one. Does that make any sense?
It does, absolutely. On that note, how can people follow you? How can people learn more about your story? Maybe buy your books?
I wrote which I just conveniently happen to have here. What a coincidence. My first book, 40 Tools for Life, is on Amazon. I wrote this originally for my two sons and my grandson. And this is more about, I wanted to leave like a legacy for them. Literally tools that you can use in life. And it's not meant to be read from chapter 1 to the very end, chapter 40. It's just meant to, you open it up and say, what do I feel like I need today? And read that chapter. The chapters are short, a couple of pages. I think the longest chapter might be 2.5 pages, and the shortest a page. That's on Amazon, but you can find me on Facebook. On Facebook, I'm actually Rick LaRoche Jr. somehow or another. I'm on Instagram, same thing. I'm not on a lot of social media. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, as Richard W. LaRoche. I just, I spend some time on social media, but probably not as much as I should. I think I wrote on the course, they said 2 things in the 0 to Dangerous that you needed to work on. And I said, 1, physically, I need to work on pull-ups. I'm just really shitty at doing pull-ups. And professionally, I need to market myself more aggressively. And I'm really shitty at marketing myself.
Well, you're talking to somebody who focuses on personal brands, so I'm here to be a resource for you.
Let's definitely stay in touch. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm really, really honored that you would have me.
Thanks so much for coming on. It was a big pleasure, and let's get you up on Everest.
Yeah, okay, I'm ready. Well, I'll need to do some climbing first, but then I'm ready.
Rick, thank you so much for being this generous with your time. Massively appreciated. Learned so much. You truly have done so many things, and it feels like, in terms of your energy, just the beginning of what's to come.
Well, like I said when we were talking on the phone, I'm 73 and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I'll always be in between gigs looking for the next gig until they put me in the ground, whatever that gig may be.